Okay, thank you all for joining us for this online author talk. Today, we are joined by Ann Kovara, author of Moving Sam Maloof. So I am your host, Seth Pringle. I'm program manager at the Sam and Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. Thank you all for your interest in this talk, and especially for making a donation to join us. This is the first time we are asking for doing the pay what you want donation requirement to join one of our online talks. And so we were just very excited by all of the response that we've gotten and all of the donations. The COVID crisis has been a real crisis for the Maloof financially, so we're looking for these ways of getting new revenues to make up for our lost tour revenues, because we're not giving tours of the historic home right now, and we have not for many months. So if you're a repeat donor to the Maloof, thank you for your continued support. That's how we continue to exist. If you're new to the Maloof and maybe you're just learning about us, check out our website, malooffoundation.org. Follow us on social media so you can see all the kind of up to the minute things that we're working on. So the Maloof is the historic home of Sam and Alfreda Maloof, but it's also, we have woodworking studios, we have a water-wise discovery garden, we have a gallery, and we have youth education programs. So there's a lot going on, a lot to learn about. If you're new to us, I hope you take a minute later on to find out about the Maloof. So the way this talk goes is I'm going to hand it over to Ann in just a moment here. She's going to show some of the amazing images from her book, Moving Sam Maloof, and talk about this amazing preservation project of moving the Maloof home from down the road a little ways, when it was in the way of the 210 freeway here in Alta Loma in Southern California. The house was saved from demolition, and it now is open to the public. So you're going to hear all about that, but it's an amazing story, and Ann was at the heart of it as the architect on the project. So she's going to tell you all about that, show you the amazing photos, and then at the end we're going to do a question and answer. So you can write your questions for Ann in the chat box, which you should find, I think it should be at the bottom of your screen for everyone. So you can feel free to type questions in there at any time during the talk, but then we'll save those for the end. After Ann's presentation is over, we'll get to those. And but you can also, if you have any questions for me, if you're having technical difficulties, you can also chat with me in the chat box. All right, so without further ado, Ann Kovara is a California registered architect with 38 years of experience as an architect, sustainability coordinator, and project and program manager, more than 15 years of which include responsibility for projects greater than $100 million. She studied architecture at the University of Arizona and is an American Institute of Architects emeritus and lead accredited professional. Her broad work experience, which extends to the transit, educational, historic, and healthcare sectors, includes high-speed rail, automated people mover, subway, and at-grade heavy rail train station projects. She was an early leader in the green transit and school sectors. So, Ann, thank you so much for being with us, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sounds good.
Thank you all for coming. I can see thumbnails of your faces. And thanks for the kind introduction, Seth. And many thanks to the Maloof Foundation for hosting my talk. And I thank you all for your donation to the foundation. The Maloof staff take their role as stewards of the historic site very seriously. Because time has been at work on the Maloof buildings, the staff members are currently dealing with some conservation issues regarding the historic building fabric. So thank you sincerely for your support. I'm going to start my presentation now. So Seth, would you help me share the screen, please? I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing the share screen option now, or?
Thank you. I got it now. Thank you.
Okay.
Here we go.
Got it. Looks good.
Okay, I hope you can all see that. And I still see some, Seth, can you tell me, do you think they all see it? Is this working? I think I lost the audio. Seth, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I got muted there. So everybody says yes, they can see it very well, and they can hear you. So go ahead.
Okay, thanks. As Seth mentioned, I'm Ann Kovara, the author of the book, Moving Sam Maloof. All the photos in this presentation are from my book. Because there are so many, I hope you'll refer to the book for the attributions for the photographers. Here is woodworker Sam Maloof in one of his iconic rocking chairs near his historic residence. Sam was a maker of beautifully sculpted handmade wooden furniture who achieved a phenomenal level of craftsmanship. Sam's friend, former President Jimmy Carter, said of him, "He's not just the best woodworker that ever lived. He was a person admirable in all his characteristics. He was a philosopher. He was deeply committed to basic moral values. I really have been inspired by Sam." Sam had that effect on people. I was inspired by him to write my book. Moving Sam Maloof explains how Sam survived his property's forced relocation by the government. It's also a case study of a successful historic structures and tree moving effort. And because my book is about Sam and his wife of 50 years, Elfrida Maloof, it's a love story. Moving Sam in real life was a complex 3-year effort that involved many people. Sam used his skills to not only create beautiful furniture, but also to develop his own distinctive architectural style and a strong set of cohesive design elements, such as this walnut wooden latch. It's located in the Maloof Historic Residence and is part of a handcrafted door and art glass assembly. The latch and door were oiled and hand rubbed with Sam's own Maloof finish, which consists of 1/3 linseed oil, 1/3 raw tung oil, and 1/3 semi-gloss urethane varnish. It's actually sold by Rockler as the Maloof finish. Sam's face is on the can. Many architects have created furniture designs in the style of their own unique architecture, including Frank Lloyd Wright, Mies van der Rohe, and Charles Eaves. Sam, however, is one of the few master woodworkers with a specific architectural style. I can only think of 2 other, Wharton Escherich and Greta Magnuson Grossman. The Maloof architectural details are found in all of his buildings to some degree, but only the historic residence and the new residence, which I will tell you about later, express all of them. As I go through the presentation, I will point out those stylistic elements. Here's another one of Sam's pieces, a rosewood double music stand. I entered Sam and Elfrida's lives in the summer of 1998 as the Maloof Relocation Project construction manager. Not really the architect. The Maloof project team and I physically moved the Maloof family compound out of the 210 freeway path to a new site about 3 miles away. This new site, which is managed by the Maloof Foundation, is now a museum complex surrounded by a drought-tolerant demonstration and sculpture garden. During the Maloof project move phase, I helped Sam navigate this life-altering event, which was a life-changing experience as well for all of us who were part of it. Bob Buettner, the Maloof Relocation Project contractor, summed it up. He said, "We were there to move Sam, and he moved us all." Taken in 1999 by Tavo Olmos, this is a photo of the Maloof family compound rooftops at the original site, which was on the southeast corner of Amethyst and Highland in the Alta Loma district of Rancho Cucamonga, near the San Gabriel Mountains. It was a group of 10 art-filled redwood-clad buildings in the middle of a dense 5-acre citrus grove. Some of the typical Maloof architectural details visible here include 1-inch by 12-inch wide, untreated, overlapping, rough-sawn redwood vertical siding, and 3 different roof forms, including a standing seam blue sheet metal shed roof, a pyramidal roof tower with a handcrafted weather vane, and 2 gable roofs. Sam called that blue the blue of his roofs. He said it was Maloof blue. Notice how the structures are completely surrounded by vegetation. Because this made the rooms very dark, Sam added roof pop-ups to let in more light. A visit to the original Maloof site was like a visit to your grandparents' farm because it really was a farm. It was a working citrus orchard. And instead of featuring one historic structure, like the Stall House in Los Angeles, the Maloof complex resembled a village. And because we moved it, it still does. Over the span of 50 years, Sam and Elfrida worked hard and sacrificed much to create this peaceful sanctuary. They both celebrated all things hecho a mano, or made by hand. The Maloofs believed that handmade crafts connect the family of man. Their home was a testament to this belief, and it continues to inspire today, even though Sam and Elfrida are gone. Besides collecting the work of other craftspeople, Sam and Elfrida were both proficient at multiple crafts. Elfrida's were drawing, painting, ceramics, and weaving. Besides woodworking, Sam was really good at painting, drawing, calligraphy, and silk screening. Before he went out on his own as a woodworker, he worked for Millard Sheets. Millard thought Sam was the best. Sort of like in the movie The Wizard of Oz, the Maloof site photos are primarily in black and white until we reach the new site. At the original Maloof site, there was a curious magic there that lifts the heart. This magic was a result of the alchemy between 2 beautiful spirits, Sam and Elfrida. If you visit the Maloof Foundation today, I think you will find that magic is still there. We moved it along with the buildings. This photo of Sam and this beautiful portrait of Elfrida Maloof were taken by Ted Catanzaro. Elfrida was amazing as well. She was an artist and a teacher, and during the 1930s and 40s was in charge of the Santa Fe Indian School art program. Her autobiography is called Recollections from My Time in the Indian Service, 1935 to 1943. Sam and Elfrida had 2 children, Flymen and Mary Lou. A woodworker like his father, Flyman lived near his parents in a corner of the original Maloof site in an old farmhouse. His children, Aaron and Amy Rebecca, often visited their grandparents. Sam had 3 craftsmen, Larry White, David Wade, and Mike Johnson. He worked with them for decades at his shop in the Maloof homestead. Sam was very attached to them and called them his boys. Larry White also lived in the Maloof guest house with his wife, Kat. Here is the northeast corner of the Maloof guest house, which is now the Maloof Foundation Visitor Center. Some of typical Maloof details here include the redwood siding, the pyramidal roof pop-up with a weather vane, and porch posts sitting on rocks in the Japanese manner. To the right is the west side of Sam's production or main shop before it was moved. On the left is the Maloof finishing shop. Because Sam needed more space, the walkway between them was widened considerably after the move. Here's what the interior of Sam's main shop looked like before it was moved. The Maloofs expected to live out their days in their family compound, surrounded by family and friends. It was not to be, however. To their horror, Sam and Elfrida learned that their property was directly in the path of the 210 freeway extension from Laverne to San Bernardino. The Maloofs were told their property might either be demolished or a freeway wall built 10 feet from their kitchen window. Their homestead was not just the place where they lived and worked, it was the center of their universe. Sam and Elfrida fought hard to save it. They endured a grueling 10-year-long environmental phase until Caltrans formally recognized Sam's importance as a craftsman and the historic value of the Maloof property. When Caltrans finally admitted that Sam was important, that 3 of his buildings were historic, the site was deemed eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. This ruling is what saved the Maloof structures. Because the original Maloof site was eligible for the National Register, the historic fabric of the place needed to be documented before anything could be saved. For this reason, Tavo Olmos documented with photographs, which are the black and white ones in my show here, the Maloof site for the Library of Congress's Historic American Building Survey Program, known as HABS. At the end of this process, however, Elfrida was mentally and physically exhausted. Sam was as tough as an old boot, but he had had a heart attack a couple of years before. He felt he was okay, but he was very worried about his freedom. This photo is of the historic residence dining area. The floors throughout the Maloof house were composed of common bricks set on building paper, but without a sand bed under it. At the insistence of Bob Buettner, all the bricks were numbered and replaced exactly where they were at the original site. And notice the fireplace on the right side of this picture. After the historic residence was moved, the other construction team members and I signed our names in the concrete slab in front of it, and then covered it up with bricks. Besides the bricks, there are many other typical Maloof architectural design elements in this room, including at the end of the room, the handcrafted walnut door hinges and trim, the exposed timber trusses, the whitewashed exposed pine ceiling boards, and a pendant light fixture of black powder coated steel with frosted glass. Sam always called these light fixtures his shipyard lights because he got the first batch of them from the Long Beach shipyard. This trim is an example of how Sam staged the furniture, hand-knotted rugs, and artwork to create environments that allowed potential clients to visualize how Maloof furniture could be used. Okay. the upper mezzanine at the center of the historic residence. The use of a second floor gallery with wooden railings draped with Navajo rugs is also a typical Maloof design element, as are ceiling hung objects, which in this case is a filled green canoe. The mezzanine also features display cases with ceramics and other art objects. Here is everyone's favorite place, the treehouse room. Notice the dense vegetation in front of the windows. Today at the new site, instead of trees, there is a remarkable view from this space. Sam was extremely depressed and lonely after Elfrida passed away. And after all the Maloof historic structures were reconstructed at the new site, Sam wasn't bonding with any of it. The first time I took him upstairs to the treehouse room, however, he looked out the window and said, "I can see Catalina Island. I think I'll stay." Among other Maloof design elements, the upper art gallery in the historic residence features typical window and door trim with expressed dovetail joints. And those are Larry White birds on the table there in the front, those black things. Here is Sam and Elfrida's master bedroom. The entire Maloof residence became an art gallery and furniture showroom. The only private areas in the house were the bathrooms and closets, and that's true today. Among other typical Maloof details, in this photo we can see the exposed heavy timber structure with the malleable cast iron bridge washers. They look like rosettes. You can see them more clearly on the exterior of the structure and not so much inside, so they're not in many photographs, but he used them typically. And also you can see the shipyard lights. Formerly known as the Pyramid Room, Sam and Elfrida used this space as their guest room. The glass display case on the right held about 13 black Maria Martinez pots. The Heard Museum doesn't even have that many, I think. She was a close friend of Elfrida's. Today, this room is used by the Maloof Foundation as a research and digital archive area. Sam and his craftsmen, Larry, Mike, and David, created this spiral staircase from apatong wood. It led from Elfrida's studio up to a sleeping loft for guests. During the clearing of the land for the new freeway, Caltrans determined that 3 endangered life forms were needed protecting: the San Bernardino kangaroo rat, a plant called the woolly star, and woodworker Sam Maloof. But none of the measures required to protect the rat or the woolly star compared with what had to be done to mitigate the impact of the freeway construction work on the Maloof sprawling house and workshop compound. In order to make this happen, their freeway construction agency, San Bernardino Association of Governments, or SANBAG, created the Maloof Relocation Project. SANBAG was the client, and Sam was considered the artist. He wasn't the client. When the project's construction phase started in July 1998, and when I first met them, Sam was 82 and Elfrida was already 87. They had just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The goal of the project was to disassemble and move the 10,000 square foot historic residence, the historic guest house, 20 major trees, Sam's historic main production shop, Sam and Elfrida's extensive art collection, their household goods, and 200,000 board feet of the finest hardwood. I mean, we're talking Sam Maloof's art collection, his wood collection. to another citrus orchard 3 miles up the road. After everything was reassembled, the original site's historic context was replicated at the new site. The effort to move Sam required 5 different types of movers: structures movers, heavy machinery movers for the shop, specimen tree movers, art movers who also moved the Maloof furniture, which is art, and household good movers. They also moved Sam's wood collection. When the Maloof project first started, Sam's agreement with Sandbag stated that the Maloof new site would be turned over to the newly created Maloof Foundation and that his historic residence would become a museum. He was permitted to maintain control and use of his 2 woodworking shops. For this reason, before we could move Sam and Elfrida, we needed to construct a new residence for them to live in at the new site on Carnelian Street. They needed to move into the new residence before we could disassemble historic residence, in other words. Sandbag had hired an architectural firm to design the new residence, but after they had spent 6 years working on it, Sam handed them back their plans. He then built this 6-foot-long redwood model in the photo here of his new home in his shop with his boys. He said he needed to work in 3D to get the proportions right. Besides being technically a world-class woodworker, Sam had a great sense of design. He continued the same design themes, use of materials, and typical architectural details he employed on the Maloof historic residence and the Maloof guest house. Here's a photo of the new residence after it was constructed in 2015 that was taken by Nora Tahiri. You can see it closely resembles the model, and it features some typical Maloof details, such as the Maloof blue steel standing seam roofs and the redwood siding and roof pop-ups. While we were constructing the new residence, whenever we had a question about it, Sam would say, "Just go look at the model." Sadly, shortly after the model was completed, the worst happened. Elfrida passed away. The loss of his Frida was too much for Sam. We didn't think he was going to make it some days. Along with his craftsmen, Sam made a Maloof-style coffin for his Frida. This is the historic residence east elevation before we touched it. Sam was confident that he could stop the move of his place and that he would live out his days there. Until this happened. Here is the same elevation after demolition of the landscaping and rough grading. Imagine Sam's profound grief. First Frida passed away, and now this. After all of Sam and Elfrida's worldly goods were moved, Sam's main shop, the guest house, and the Maloof historic residence were disassembled into 12 sections and moved on 11 trucks in 9 separate moves to the top of Carnelian Street in Alta Loma. In order to lift the guest house off its foundations, American movers first put steel I-beams under it and then lifted it up with hydraulic jacks. Here is the raising of the upstairs gallery, downstairs dining room, kitchen section onto steel move beams at the original site. This was the last section to be moved. Then the same section was finessed onto move dollies. The iconic spiral staircase was disconnected from the foundation and wrapped in silver packing material. It traveled with the pyramid and spiral staircase roof section hung from the ceiling. The silver wrap made it look a little bit like a sea monster. Here is that same section ready to leave the original site. The very first structure moved off the original site was the wood storage room attached to Sam's main shop. The wood storage room and the dust collection closet make the turn onto Amethyst Street. I remember thinking at the time that the wood storage room looked a lot like the Unabomber's cabin. The second truck to leave for the new site held Mike and Larry's portion of the main shop. Mike and Larry's shop again. The Maloof shop section's traveling up the steep 6% grade on Carnelian Street. The first truck reaches the new site. The funny stick hanging off the front is to move overhead utility lines out of the way. Here we're looking south towards the new residence with its blue roofs and at the east end of the main shop. The survey stakes in the picture are for the placement of the historic residence and guest house. Next, the guest house was brought around the south side of the shop along the top of the steep slope. This was tricky because the guest house could not be cut down the middle. It was moved in one piece and it was 40 feet wide, which was as wide as the street. Then the 7 sections of the historic residence will be plugged into the end of the shop. All of the subsequent building moves took place in the middle of the night because, as I said, the sections were as wide as the street or had pop-ups. American movers would start the move activity at the original site around 11 at night and would end up at the new site around dawn. We would walk along next to it. It was like a slow-moving parade. In this photo, the portion of the house that was Sam and Elfrida's office is ready to leave for the new site. At the new site today, it's where the Maloof Foundation tours start. That same building section was brought onto the new site and moved over the footings. Because all the structures were built by Sam and his team in a relatively informal manner, none of them were really square. Sam would sometimes jump out of bed in the morning with the thought, I think I'll add a room on today. For this reason, the trenches were dug in advance, but the concrete footings and the floor slabs were poured in later days. Pulling the spiral staircase and pyramid roof section over the footings at the new site. This same section parked on top of the steep slope above the new residence at the new site. Looking north at the treehouse room, up on hydraulic jacks at the new site. It's ready to be connected to the gallery section on the left. The tower room, parked at the new site, still on move dollies. This is the room that contains Sam's antique carousel horse. Here are all the sections at the new site. But before the sections could be connected together, the American movers had to stage them all on the slope above the new residence. After the last section was moved, Bob Buettner went back to the original site and took this photo through the Maloof main gate. You can see the freeway vehicles in the distance. They started work just a couple of hours after we moved the last section. Our project was on the critical path for the freeway work. And we were sweating bullets thinking we were going to impact them, but we got it done with just a couple hours to go. Here's Sam and his See Sam in the blue jeans and the brown coat there with the black glasses? We also moved 20 major trees. Here Sam waits for a 50,000-pound Coast live oak tree to reach the new site, which is on the back of the truck in the picture. In this photo, the La Cresta tree movers are planting that big oak in the interior courtyard that is now surrounded by the guest house, shops, and historic residence. The main shop is in the picture, but not the historic residence because it hadn't been brought up to the new site as yet. Here, the 60-foot Canary Island date palm that used to be next to the Maloof main gate is being brought up from the original site to the new site. A lightning storm actually broke out as the palm was being lifted off the truck. The La Cresta landscape team planted the big palm in the rainstorm anyway. You can see the new residence front door in the background. The big palm was successfully transplanted to the west of the new residence where it thrives today. Putting the historic structures back together again was almost overwhelming. Here is the historic residence dining room. And here is the Maloof historic latch that I showed you earlier. It looks to me like two clasped hands. It's located today on the historic residence sitting room south door. During the home's disassembly, however, it was stolen. So Bob Buettner removed all the remaining handcrafted doors, latches, and hinges in the house. The objects were treated as works of art and stored for about a year in a locked cage along with the site's weather vanes. After the Maloof property reconstruction was complete, all the doors and hinges were reinstalled. Bob Buettner, my deputy construction manager, Dolores Morea, and I met Sam at the former historic residence, which was now a museum managed by the Maloof Foundation. Bob, Dolores, and I held a ceremony of the latches, during which we gave Sam back the keys to his house and a box with all of his latches in it. We shared a moment as Sam looked in the box and couldn't remember where all the latches should go. After joining us in a hearty laugh, Sam led us from door to door. He just installed whatever latch seemed right. Then he went into his shop and made another latch for the door, for this door that we're looking at with the missing one. After all the architectural details in the historic residence were reconstructed, you can see that they resembled what Sam was trying to do. We think we successfully recreated what Sam had at the original site. Here's the pyramid room. And the typical details here include the handcrafted walnut doors and frame, the floating free edge walnut shelf, and a post on a rock, which is similar to the treatment of the porch posts at the guest house. Sam's iconic dining table and benches, along with most of his other furniture, were moved back into the historic residence, but not into his home, the new residence. On the 24th of January in the year 2000, Sam celebrated the dedication of the Maloof Foundation site by signing his name on the sidewalk, just to the west of his main shop. You can see it there today. It was also his 84th birthday. We put everything back in Sam's shop just the way he wanted it, including the furniture patterns over the window near his bandsaw. The Maloof handcrafted works in progress were reinstalled in Sam's shop also, including this Evans chair. After the Maloof project team and I finished our work and left the site in September of 2001, Sam and his craftsmen constructed several new buildings. In this new wood barn, Sam and his boys finally had a place to properly store their hardwood and works in progress, such as these dining chairs. Here are some slabs of maple and walnut in the new wood storage building. This is the new Maloof Studio showroom. So the Maloof woodworkers finally had a proper showroom also. Here is the new residence entryway. I still call it that, even though it's been there for more than 20 years. Some of the typical Maloof architectural details here include the standing seam steel Maloof blue gable roof, the redwood siding, navy blue painted structural elements, wrapped wooden posts with bridge washers, and hanging artwork. In this case, it's a Balinese rice goddess and 3 Solari bells. And the blue front door echoes the main door to Sam's shop. This free edge credenza was made by Larry White for the new residence foyer. Sam made a round loft window with twigs for over the front door. After Sam moved into the new residence, along with his craftsmen, he built a new spiral staircase in the great room, similar to the one in Alfreda's studio. Other typical Maloof design elements in this area include the second floor gallery with wooden railings draped with Navajo rugs, the shipyard lights, the navy blue exposed heavy timber structure, wrapped wooden posts with the bridge washers, whitewashed pine ceiling boards, and walnut window and door trim, and of course, the brick floor. Sam and his boys also trimmed out the north window of the great room in redwood like a piece of fine furniture with express dovetail joints. This is a free edge Tasmanian eucalyptus burl table crafted by the Maloof workshop for the great room. You can see the brick floor in the background. When the historic residence became a museum, most of Sam's furniture remained there, including Sam's iconic dining table. So he made a new dining room table and chairs for the new residence kitchen, as well as furniture for the rest of his new home. After Alfreda passed away, Sam married his friend of 50 years, Beverly Maloof. The new residence is her private home and is not part of the museum property. Here we are in a cozy corner of the new residence kitchen. We usually have a book signing at this point. Because this is virtual, this is a virtual presentation, I have an idea. Yeah. If any of you would like me to sign your book, I can do that if you would please send me an email with your address and to whom you would like the book dedicated. I will mail back to you a signed book plate that you can paste like this, that you can paste into your book. My email address is
Oh, we may have lost Ann there. Ann, can you hear us? So hopefully she can rejoin us. Her email address that she was stating there is movingsammaloof@gmail.com. I'm going to type it into the chat here. Okay, and so very generous of Ann to offer that. That's pretty awesome. I included a link to the book. So if you want to buy the book from the Maloof Foundation, the link is in the chat also. And here Ann is coming back to us. She should be reappearing any moment. But yeah, so if you want to order the book, that's and then email Ann and she will give you the signed insert. Let me just get Ann unmuted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, hello. All right.
Sorry.
Awesome. That's okay. I was just filling everyone in on your email address and telling them that I have the link to the book in the chat. And the email is, just check to see if I got this right, movingsammaloof@gmail.com.
Right. Yes, thanks.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad you made it back to us. So we're going to do our Q&A next, unless you had anything else to add, Ann, about the signing.
No, I'd like to just say thank you all for listening to my talk. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's such an amazing story. Thank you for everything you did to help make the move possible. So yeah, we have a few questions already. Some good questions in here in the chat box, but feel free to continue to type in here as we go, everyone. And Ron had asked if someone is living in the new residence, and kind of touched on this a little bit later in the talk, but yes, Beverly, Maloof, Sam's second wife, is still living in the new residence. And someone asked about what year Alfreda died and what year Sam died. Alfreda died in 1998. And then the move happened, and then Sam married Beverly once after the move had happened. And then Sam died in 2009. And that was questions from Fred. And Fred also asked, I'll let you answer this one, Ann, who paid for the move?
You did, the people of the United States, with federal highway money. And a lot of it was local money too. It was a huge, we were the lunatic fringe of the Two-Tam Freeway project. It was part of that.
All right, and let's see, Heather is asking about, do you have any information you can share about how the new site was chosen?
Well, it was chosen because it was the same size and configuration as the existing site, and it was a citrus orchard. It was a 5-acre site with a similar shape, but the citrus trees were really old. Citrus don't live that long, which was a problem. So that was it. And there weren't many structures on it.
So a couple people are asking about the photos, whether all of the photos from your slideshow are included in the book. And then also someone else was asking if they are available online anywhere.
They're in my book. You can see them. I have a website, movingsammaloof.com. You can also see my author's page on Amazon. And some of my photos are posted there. But if you wanted a copy of it for some reason, you could look up in my book who the photographer was, and I could help you find them. You could ask for a copy of it.
Great, and I just added the website to the chat box there in case you all want to copy and paste that. Okay, so another couple of related questions from a couple of different people. One person was asking if any of the trees that were moved were lost or didn't survive, and then also if there was any damage to the structure from the move.
Well, I'll take the tree one first. Okay, I don't know which one of you wise guys said that. So if you've been up to the courtyard, there's no 50,000-pound oak tree there now. It died. We killed it. They had just invented something called the aerometer at Cal State Riverside. So we used that to water the big oak tree because nobody knew how much water you should give a transplanted oak tree. And so we use these aerometers, but the instructions didn't work for us because where it was planted right next to the guest house is very clay soil and it held in the water. And so it rotted and we killed it. And we all cried when it had to be removed. And then as far as damaging, no, we didn't damage the structures. We did a lot of work repairing them, putting them back together. They were kind of sad shape because there's a lot going on there and Sam didn't have the money, to maintain everything and to the condition they would need to be in to be put on a truck and moved up the road. So we patched all the leaks. We put in brand new mechanical systems. And after we got done with it, it was in a much better shape than when we found it.
And so speaking of the structure, and it was built by Sam and Sam and the boys basically piece by piece and with whatever money they had. I wonder if you can speak to Sam's kind of architectural style and if there's any interesting things you discovered about how he built the structure since he wasn't a trained architect, or any of the kind of peculiarities of Sam's buildings.
Oh, sure. This is something you wouldn't know by looking at it. When we cut the historic residence up into 7 sections because it was so big to move it up the street. And we had to decide, the structural engineer had to decide which end of the section was going to get the structure, because one was going to be an open hole unless it was the outside piece. The biggest concern was the gallery, the upstairs gallery. Sam had built that in a really squirrely manner because Elfrida didn't want him to do it because she was afraid the house would get full of dust. So he built it in a very strange way, and it was really, really hard to take that piece apart. But you couldn't tell unless you were the people trying to deconstruct it.
So that's great. And Christopher's asking, was the number of board feet of wood moved 200,000 feet? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and so some of you know this, I'm sure, but his shop is still being operated by Mike Johnson and Sam Maloof Woodworker, where they're making Sam's designs. And so I was also wondering about how Sam and the studio or the woodworking business kept going while the move was happening. I'm wondering if you can speak to that. And it seems like that would be an interesting challenge
Well, that's a really great question. In the agreement with Sandbag, in the contract, it said Sandbag would allow Sam to keep working while the structures are being moved. But come to find out, he had to work outside in a tent during a very rainy winter with his power tools. It was very tricky, but it was a good thing in the end because he started using the free edge on his tables more often. I asked Larry, why did he do that? I asked Larry once, why did Sam, in the history of Samness, why did he suddenly start using the free edge like George Nakashima? And he said, Sam told him that it was easier, it was quicker and easier to finish the pieces while they're working on the tent. And then he just kept doing it after that. And while they were working in the tent, they had a huge commission and they couldn't, he had like a 6-year backlog at the time. He had a huge commission for a church out in the San Fernando Valley, the pieces on the altar, and they're just incredible. While they were working outside in that tent, they made the most beautiful furniture. It was really, really amazing.
So Teresa is asking if the furniture is still being made, and Ron also asked a similar question about he said, are future craftspeople being trained to continue to operate the shop in Sam's style? So I can expand on that a little bit. I mentioned Mike Johnson. So Mike Johnson started working for Sam in 1981 when he was a very young man, and it continues to make the furniture. And so he worked with Sam, for decades, and he was, given permission by Sam to continue making the designs. So that the company is called Sam Maloof Woodworker. So they have a website, and you can still order Sam Maloof designs to be made by Mike Johnson, and it's a family operation with his son Stephen and his wife Joanne. So yes, Mike is still making them. Larry White is also still active here through the foundation. Larry was Sam's first employee in the 60s, and then he came back to work with him in the 90s and helped with the move. And he also he teaches classes where you can learn some of those techniques in our wood shop. So yes, the legacy and heritage is still alive. Okay, and we have a question from John asking, did Sam make changes to the house after the move?
No. He was, you mean the new residence or the historic residence?
I think he means the historic residence.
No, he didn't own it anymore. It belonged to the Maloof Foundation. He wasn't even allowed. He had a serious problem with this. First he thought he would live in both places. He didn't understand the extent of his contract. Then he thought he would use then he thought they would agree that he could use the historic residence as his guest house. He had so many people visiting him all the time. And then it was obvious that he wasn't allowed to do anything with it. So then he turned his attention and turned all of his energies on the new residence, which his details are just beautiful.
Yeah, so it was quite a transition for Sam to have his home that he built and lived in for many, many years. Still the same house, but all of a sudden it's a museum, right? And yeah. And with I've heard that he wasn't a fan of the exit signs, for the fire code regulations. And I'm wondering if you can also kind of speak to that process for Sam. It's such a seemingly impossible project. So many things could have gone wrong and kind of derailed it. I'm wondering if you ever had times where you thought, oh, this is, this is never going to happen, or if you felt like Sam kind of where he was, did he always just believe that the house would be saved, or what was that kind of mental process like?
No, every day we didn't know whether it was going to happen, but for a lot of reasons. One is uh, we didn't know if Sam could physically get through it. He had had a heart attack. It was so stressful. You know how unnerving it is, say, when your kitchen and you can't use your kitchen. Imagine if your shop and your house are torn up and you've got all these people around. It was so stressful. Every day we didn't know if he was going to make it, and we didn't know. We would just take it one day at a time. We didn't know if we were going to physically be able to move what we were working on. There were so many unknowns. You know, when you're working with historic structures, it's like unknown city. And we had so many unknowns, and especially after Alfreda died, we thought he would die too. We didn't think we didn't think he could take it. He was just went off his nut. He was just it was too much for him. And I don't know that you all know this. Frida just had a stomach ache, and he took her to the hospital, and they said, well, you just go home, she'll be fine, take a rest, come back in the morning. And she died in the night. And he just couldn't not get over the fact that not only did he not know that she was going to pass on, but he couldn't say goodbye. And he would just never recovered from that. But the biggest problem with the move itself was that the architects had figured out the move route, and nobody checked it. We had started disassembling the structures, and then the move contractors came on board to move the first structures. They moved the shop first in the daytime, which was in small pieces. And then when it got to moving the pieces as wide as the street, they told Bob Buechner, the contractor, that they can't make the turn that they're supposed to make. It wasn't going to happen. So we had all these pieces disassembled, and then we weren't going to be able to get from point A to point B. And what finally happened was, I was just driving around thinking I was going to kill myself or something. And there was a section of Wilson that was closed down because Steve Topor and his people were building condos right there. And it wasn't a through street. I just happened to I just went over there, and I was just talking to him, telling him about our problem. And he said that he would finish his work 3 months early and pave the street for us so we could bring our big heavy sections through down Wilson and then turn up Carnelian. And he even built a little bridge over an arroyo. Isn't that just amazing? And it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't have done that. I can't even thank him enough. I hope he's listening. I can't see if he's here or not.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story. That's so amazing. And a good lesson, right? In woodworking and carpentry, they say measure twice, cut once, right? So if you're ever planning on cutting up your house, and measure the street before you start the process.
Right.
So we're a little past 5 o'clock here, so we should probably wrap it up. Sorry we didn't get to all of the questions, but thank you for everyone who asked questions and joined the conversation. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you so much, Ann. Yeah, don't forget to go buy the book, everybody, and thank you again for your donations. They're on behalf of everyone at the Maloof, very much appreciated. Do you have any final words, Ann?
No, just thank you so much for your support. The Maloof sure needs it.
All right, thank you. All right,
When COVID's over, that you'll go visit.
Yes, exactly. We're still closed now. We're hoping to reopen for more outdoor experiences soon. Stay tuned. And yeah, we hope to see you on site soon, everyone. So have a great weekend. Thanks again. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.